What is up, everybody? My name is All Hail Buckets. I will be your host for this evening. I am flanked to my side by the famous, the very famous, the even more famous than everyone that you will ever know, JTAR9. JTAR9, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm good. And below me, the adjective Moriarty. How you doing?
Which adjective?
I don't remember.
Only bad ones.
Yeah, the 5 inches tall, Moriarty.
Okay, very good. Yes, hello.
And to the furthest away from me, also famous, the recently and moved, the recently and play buttoned, the Golden Bolt. Kevin, how are we doing?
I'm doing well. We should say this is the Crubcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Crubcast.
It sure is the Crubcast. You are absolutely right. And today, fellas, I brought in a bit of a topic.
A bit?
A bit of a topic.
Just a little bit. Just a smidge.
A little bit.
The tiny little boy.
It is. It's a tiny little boy. So it's just a little cute little guy. So the topic today is pivotal moments in media, right? So whether it's a change in technology, whether it's some piece of media that just can't be separated from its successors, there are some things that if they hadn't been made or if they hadn't been adopted, that media would not be the same, be it music, games, movies, TV, all of it, right? And I wanted to talk about that today. So, you know, I guess we'll start with Kevin. Kevin, do you have any examples of those right off the top of your head? I know we had talked about it briefly off camera, but
Justin, you should start because I'm
Justin
a fill-in today, so I got to
That's
think
what
about.
I was thinking.
Put me on the spot. Jesus Christ!
I'm putting a timestamp.
Oh God. I would say that the thing that kind of piqued my interest in terms of that is probably Zelda Breath of the Wild. It really changed a lot of how we saw open world gaming since its release, and now you have a bunch of games that tried to copy its style because of how successful it was, and then you have other games that kind of do kind of the old style and try and refine that instead of doing the Breath of the Wild style. Games like Horizon, Forbidden West, they're very much so not Breath of the Wild. So having them do their thing while seeing the success of something like a Zelda is quite fascinating to me, considering we kind of like we know how Zelda Breath of the Wild kind of changed everything. So it's interesting that you're not going in that direction, especially in a game where there's a lot of climbing on walls and stuff. Ghost of Tsushima is also a good example of that as well.
Interesting. I feel like, yeah, I mean, I think you're right? Because like you got Elden Ring, and you're a filthy Genshin player, so there's that. I can't think of any other examples that directly took
Immortals
influence
Phoenix
from Breath
Rising.
of the Wild.
Immortals Phoenix Rising is a game made by Ubisoft, and it is just Breath of the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
They have the glider, they have the chopping down trees, climbing everything. It's just Breath of the Wild. If Brody was here, he'd be able to tell us a lot about Immortals Phoenix Rising, but he's not.
Well, and even if you go the next step, a game like Elden Ring takes steps heavily based on what Breath of the Wild does. Even if it started production before Breath of the Wild came out, that doesn't change the fact that that game's design is just Breath of the Wild for people that torture themselves. I say that as someone who played most of Elden Ring and tortured myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elden Ring is definitely, I wouldn't call it a clone, but it's definitely in that same sort of space. You do have immortals, or I guess monsters, gods and monsters it was at one point. You have Genshin Impact, which, you could talk about there as well, Justin.
It makes money hand over fist, too. It makes so much
clearly
money.
Built off of Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it is so closely.
I started playing Genshin Impact because I wanted that taste of Breath of the Wild again, and we had been waiting for 6 years for Tears of the Kingdom. And I was like, you know what?
I mean, I think that you've got at this point kind of 3 open world, structures. You've got the Ubisoft open world, right? You have the Breath of the Wild open world, and then you have like the Skyrim open world, which I would also kind of tag in with like The Witcher and things like that.
Maybe like GTA
even though they're
too.
a little bit Ubisoft-y, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not quite on that same space.
There's classic open world in that vein.
I guess weird. Classic open world, Ubisoft open world,
and then Breath of the Wild goes by open air was the design philosophy they described it as.
Yeah.
So
and you've got a lot of games that are kind of in that space still. A lot of them are kind of indie. You don't have these big, massive clone titles. The one that comes to mind is a game called Windbound, which was a very popular indie game for just a short period of time, where you're kind of just going around on a boat, and so it's Breath of the Wild with boats. You're a boat,
so Wind Waker.
But yeah, and it's very good. It's super neat, but it still kind of follows into that same sort of Breath of the Wild thing. And then of course you've got Horizon, which is sort of similar-ish, and you've got Immortals, Immortals, Gods and Monsters, like they're all kind of in that same sort of space.
And it's interesting.
Where do we put Minecraft on this spectrum of open world
Sandbox
types?
Totally
Sandbox
different.
Different. Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Actually, that's a really good example too of a thing that changed everything. Right?
Yeah.
Is Minecraft. Minecraft advented the sandbox gaming. It epitomized it, and it became a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
You've got your crafting and building and modifying, all that kind of stuff.
Were you not a Gary's Mod guy, Moriarty?
I mean, Gmod, was very, very successful in a certain kind of niche group, and it has, its legacy and influence, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got the whole SFM kind of space and like making this machinima and all that. But I would say that Gmod is more famous for kind of popularizing TTT and popularizing the prop hunt more than it is for being this sort of open sandbox kind of world.
SFM and TTT, what do those
Source
stand for?
Filmmaker and Trouble in Terrorist Town, which Trouble in Terrorist Town is just Among Us.
Okay.
Right. Among Us is Trouble in Terrorist Town, but with more
Town
more
of
roles.
Salem.
It's also it's more, if you're familiar with the base of either Werewolf or Mafia, which are what they're really based off of.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess, what is that? Town of Salem. That was a very popular version of it as well.
Yeah.
TTT is that, but with guns and, first person.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like there's one person with a knife. They have to go around and kill people. And there's one person with a gun who is the sheriff, and they have to shoot the person, and they have to, and everyone has to work together to deduce who the imposter is, basically.
I love TTT. I think it's such a great game, but boy, do you need a lot of people to play it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, it's the same way with like Mafia and Werewolf, though. You need a lot of people, and you need people who are willing.
Yeah.
Like, that's the the biggest thing is that like sometimes people don't buy in, or people do bits, and it's like the bits are funny, but it's like I kind of want to play the game to a certain extent.
The bits are funny if you're in on it. If you're not in on it, then it doesn't really work for you.
So I wouldn't really say that Gmod was super influential on the sandbox world, right? Like it was it definitely brought TTT out, and its version of it was very, very popular, and it definitely made prop hunt kind of a go-to thing, which now we've seen kind of be picked up by all sorts of games, up to and including Fortnite now.
So I actually need to ask what prop hunt is. It's been popping up on my TikTok, some clips of people playing prop hunt, and I don't get it. I don't know what the object of the game is.
It's hide and seek. So you hide as an object,
but you can choose. Yeah. So you run around in a level and you see a cup and you click on the cup and now you are a cup, and then you go hide in the environment as a cup. And then
that sounds like despicably hard for the seekers.
There are ways to make it easier. For one, everything that you do messes with stuff, so there's clearly physics damage in areas you've been, so you can kind of, that doesn't look perfect, right? Things have been moved around and they're knocked around. Additionally, I think every 15 or 30 seconds you make a sound in most servers, at least.
Yeah, it's like proxy based. You can tell where the sound's coming from, kind of thing. There are also other games that are indie games. I think there's one that's like kind of like a witch hunt, where you're a witch and you hide as an object. And they have tools for the seekers to try and find people, things like that.
Yes. And perhaps the most important part of it is that if you choose a cup, you're going to have like 1 HP. If you choose, a bed, you might have 200 HP. So if you get shot or a grenade goes off nearby, you're going to be killed if you're in the corner as a cup. Whereas if you're, an armoire, you might survive a little bit longer and not immediately die.
Yeah,
so
people would be like, I threw a grenade at that armoire. Obviously, it's fine, and they'll walk away.
Right.
That is incredibly interesting.
Yes.
I kind of like that as a concept. I might have to see if I have any games
I would
like
love
that.
to get up a really
try.
good community game of TTT and Prop Hunt. I think that would be a really fun thing to do, but it does require a significant number of people to do it.
Plus, you have to have the right games to have the right assets for each TTT and Prop Hunt map, which I think most of them are free now.
That makes sense.
Yeah, you're gonna end up buying something like a Counter-Strike Source, but that's way out. We are so far in the weeds.
Yeah, we're now.
No, that's
fine.
I was curious. That's okay. That's okay. I was curious.
Though. Do you think that the Gmod community is like the first game to really have that like you bring your own fun to it kind of a thing? Because like you see that more and more nowadays with things like Sea of Thieves and Skull and Bones and things like that.
And Minecraft to a certain extent, bring your own fun.
But I'm trying to think, when was the first game that really like did something like that? And we haven't heard from Kevin yet, so I want to see what he thinks.
You are throwing me into the most interesting positions in this podcast today.
Well, I'll explain why after we're done. But
I'm thinking. I don't know that I consider Gmod a bring your own fun game, mainly because it was a conduit for. It was a conduit for modding, obviously. Mm-hmm. It was a conduit for, like, it's a different kind of sandbox where, like, Minecraft is kind of game, bring your own fun, but Minecraft has, like, Minecraft is Legos. I don't consider that as much of a bring your own fun as Rust. That kind of thing. Like bring your own fun to me is here's a world, figure it out, as opposed to make a world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that all of this kind of follows off of the early sort of simulation sandbox games, like the Sim games, Sim City and Sim Ants and all that kind of stuff. The city builders, where you are given the tools to make your own whatever, but there's still sort of a game there, right? Yeah. And then that sort of followed on as it, whatever. I would say maybe, though, Gmod is the first of the more kind of modern sandbox games. I think there was an MMO called Second Life that's a little bit closer towards like the beginning. It may be earlier by a year or a few months, but those two games are definitely super influential in this. But when we're talking about sandbox games, Minecraft changed everything, and it changed it really, really quickly. Not when it first launched in like 2009 or whatever, but a few years after that, when it came out with one of the early betas that was very popular, where they introduced a whole bunch of blocks. I want to say it was in 2011, but it might have been 2012.
That lines up with the history of Minecraft that I know.
Yeah, a few years after it had done its first initial launch, then it came out with just swinging, just absolutely swinging, and Minecraft took over the world and has never stopped taking over the world. It's still the most profitable, most played game ever, right? Dude, like it's
so
with
nuts.
Number of sales, I think it is higher than any other game by a significant amount.
It's either that or Tetris.
I think Tetris has the most units, but not the most sales.
Oh, because
it was included on a lot of things for free.
And Minecraft had a lot of merchandising stuff.
Yeah, so it's made just a disgusting amount of money. The best purchase that Microsoft ever did was pay only $2 billion for Minecraft.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah,
that's a wild.
Sorry, I say the fact they're paying triple the price for Activision is kind of nutty. Now that you say that,
it's more than paying 30. They're paying 30 times the price for Activision.
I thought it was $6 billion.
What was Disney Star Wars? Was that
$69 billion?
Was Disney Star Wars $4 billion or $7 billion?
I want to say it was 6. But
okay, so 10 times what Disney paid for Star Wars is what Activision is the buyout is for.
That doesn't seem right.
God.
The inflation of mergers and acquisitions is insane in recent years.
Mm-hmm. It's between that and Twitter. Like, I think the value of the dollar just exploded in terms of like company buyouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that one's an interesting.
Yeah, that was a whole other story. But like, the fact that
Activision
you
Blizzard
reminded me
has
it's
value.
69
Twitter doesn't
billion
really.
for that.
Actually, I have a parlay. Here. Twitter.
Parlay?
Well, I have a seg. Twitter, like Twitter and like social media and everything wouldn't have happened without MySpace, right? Like MySpace was kind
None
of
of them would happen
progenitor.
without Friendster. Quite
Yeah,
frankly.
Friendster, and then Blogspot also is pretty important too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, depending on how far you want to go back, you could even argue some part of
LiveJournal and all that kind of
GeoCities
stuff.
before that.
Yeah.
Oh, GeoCities, yeah.
Yeah,
Any of these
nothing's
things-
original.
Any of these things that start with like the idea of making the internet and creation on the internet accessible to non like developers, like people who don't want to like learn how to code all the time. That's all that makes sense. Trace it back to GeoCities and that era.
Yeah, because I feel like people would have naturally come up with the idea of like creating communities and finding people online.
Yeah.
Because
or
of how
like a
connected it
YouTube,
is.
like people would have arrived at like video hosting sites. I think no matter what, like the idea of a YouTube. And YouTube.
Well,
just
YouTube
happened
was
to be-
started on MySpace, right? Like YouTube was an app that was loaded through MySpace,
That
and
makes
then
a lot of sense.
yeah, Google then decided to offer them like $2 million, I think.
Man.
You want to talk good buyouts?
I was saying, and you want to talk good buyouts? It's
Yeah.
an amazing one.
And
Yeah, they offered
and
them very little money.
How about this face-
But they were also super broke because it turns out the video hosting is disgustingly expensive.
Which makes sense.
Yeah,
It's
that's
the reason
fair.
why there is no good competitor to YouTube, right? Like the only thing that we could have in this space, there's two companies that could ostensibly combat a YouTube, and neither of them are. One of them is Amazon, which we could have had a Twitch tube, right? We could have had an Amazon tube.
They tried poorly.
They tried
Yeah.
very poorly. I thought it was going to happen when Twitch streaming started to have their scheduled VODs.
Yep.
I was like, oh, okay, so we're going to have a system now for handling VODs on the back end, and that means that we're going to eventually see Amazon Tube. And this was also, if you recall, at the same time, Google was pulling all of the Amazon Kindle store stuff off of Google Play, and Amazon was pulling all of the Google stuff off of the Kindles. So, like, you couldn't run Amazon Prime Video through a Chromecast. It just won't work.
Yeah.
Right. So all that kind of back and forth of that stuff was happening through Amazon. And then the second potential, and could still become a potential competitor, maybe, would be Netflix. They have the bandwidth. They have the servers. They understand how it works to do video stuff. They're just not really focused on making kind of these lower tier, video stuff. But I think that as we're seeing with podcasts, right, we are seeing where people are buying podcasts left and right because they want to own the kind of content that people will follow. Right, and people will follow for podcasts. They'll follow to Spotify. They'll follow to YouTube. They'll follow to whatever in order to get the podcast that they really love. I think that we have the potential for Netflix to say, hey, we have all this back end, we have all this stuff, and why do we need more people to actually come and watch Netflix, and we need to make the money, and we're not making a whole lot of the original series and all that kind of stuff, right? Like we're making a lot less money off of those because we would subsidize them with these purchases of The Office and purchases of Seinfeld and Friends and all that kind of stuff, right? And people would come and watch all of those and subsidize these costs of originals, and they're not. So I think that we have the potential of seeing them say, hey, we're going to bring in a lot more of these very low-end originals who are very, very cheap and potentially maybe in the future.
See,
you know who needs originals? You know who needs money for originals? That's right, folks. It's us. Please subscribe to the Crubcast Patreon. You can find us at crub.org. You can find absolutely everything that you need. Find us on all audio platforms. Catch us on YouTube, social media, at Crub Official on everything, except for Twitch, which is at Crub_official. But folks, if you're listening to us on an audio platform, I guarantee you it costs you not nearly as much as it costs Netflix to get these properties. If you want to just slide on over to YouTube and press that subscribe button, I guarantee you it's free. And you know what? Hit that like button. It's that costs you nothing either. And if you don't like it by the end of the video, you can take it back, as Kevin always says.
I was going to set you up for that, Sig, but then made an interesting point that I'll actually dispute. I don't think Netflix is the one that would do it, mainly because I don't think they have a monetization path for hosted video content, even if it was behind like you have to sign up and be one of the approved creators. I think that opens up a lot of risk for them in that either A, you are then paying for Netflix and part of the Netflix cost is then going into subsidizing the creator fund, or B, it's a separate site that is freely hosted. That means that Netflix has to run ads more frequently on that separate part of Netflix for Netflix Tube.
That was actually the reason that made me think about it, was then they started talking about doing a Netflix free that's ad supported. And if you're going to do that, all of a sudden it makes sense to suddenly create sort of user generated content, right? Because then it makes sense to have it. And then you could even do it like they do with the Amazon Kindle Prime or Kindle Unlimited, or with the YouTube Premium, where you're getting a percentage of the monthly spend based off of the number of viewers that you're getting.
Sure. My thought was more that the closer you get into that territory, the more scrutiny that Netflix's funds go under. And I think they're afraid at all costs. They don't want to have people see what their finances are like, because then it all comes crashing down. I think the third...
it all comes out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think the third of the three would actually be Apple. Because they have the war chest to say, fuck it, we'll do it.
They really do.
That's true.
I don't see how Apple would want creative control, right? And we've seen that with their podcasts. If you look at how like podcast systems work for Apple, right? They want too much creative control. I don't know that they would allow you to have a stream or a video on there, but they do have the war. They have like $200 billion in cash. They could literally pay, every single mid-range creator a good annual salary to come over to Apple and just own it.
Hey, Apple.
Yo, you want call us. Dude,
we'll
call
the Crubcast.
Call the Crubcast.
We're mid-range.
We'll produce content for you.
We're not talking mid as in quality.
No. We are a bang for your buck podcast.
Why are you pitching yourself to Tim Cook right now?
Because I want some of the Timmy money.
I'll pitch myself to absolutely anybody. I am not discriminatory there. But I do have to say that I think the iPhone is also something that was incredibly influential. Possibly the biggest thing ever. The iPhone?
I think that BlackBerry
there's
has
electricity and cameras and all sorts of things.
Okay. Sorry, the biggest thing since
God.
Yeah. Okay, the biggest thing since the year 2000 or something. You know what I mean?
I think that BlackBerry is a lot more influential, just from the basis of it being the first like personal computer that like
they did get Dennis to play Jonathan Blackberry in the Blackberry movie.
Right, you mean the first pocket PC, not the first
that's what I mean.
PC. Yeah.
Pocket PC.
Careful.
Wait,
that's what they were called.
Don't Google that one. Don't Google that phonetically.
Yeah, do not Google that. Yeah. I don't
I would have gone with like advanced PDA.
Yeah, advanced PDA.
Because the PDA was never connected to the internet like that. You could connect it like by landline.
They didn't want to compare with Palm.
I call it a
Palm PDA.
That's fair.
We call it a personal pan PDA. Ooh. A personal pan PC.
Yeah. BlackBerry is really influential. You're absolutely right. But they were influential because they focused exclusively on high net worth CEO, high power people, right? And they did it all through this system that was available to them for free. You could not easily replicate that today. And in fact, because of it, they don't exist anymore.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. They only exist in name because BBM is on like the App Store and the Google Play Store and stuff like that.
Yeah, their brand is still out there, but they're owned by some venture capitalists, as far as I know now.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Which one's more influential, though, is really, really difficult because the iPhone changed a lot of things. Microsoft at that time did not want to, and they could have, did not want to create a touchscreen anything because they believed that touchscreens were foolish. You had what's his name? The guy.
Bill
I hate him so. Steve Ballmer.
Oh, Phil
You had
Spencer.
Steve Ballmer, who, if you look at every decision he made for Microsoft, if you just bet against him, you won every time. The man was perfect at choosing the worst. Oh, who would ever want to touch their phone? That's disgusting. Who would ever want to have music, it's digital music, in their pocket? Why would you want that? No.
Okay.
Who would ever want to have a big screen phone, like some sort of a tablet thing? Who would want that? Nobody wants to play video games at home. I mean, like, literally every decision this man made was fascinatingly bad.
I need to agree with him on the touchscreen one. As much as I'm used to it now and I love touchscreens, I can't see myself like really using a touchscreen for something like a computer. Whereas for something like a phone, maybe it makes a little bit more sense.
See, that's the thing. He saw that and he was like, "Oh, people really like touching their phones on the phone. We should make them touch their computers." It came out with Windows 8. He's
and Windows 8 was made for touchscreens.
People did not like Windows 8.
The iPhone came out, he pushed the kin. Do you remember the kin?
Do you remember
No, I don't.
It was his idea.
That's hilarious. What the heck is the kin? And
the kin, who knows? It's a weird fucking phone that nobody understands because it's like a sideways BlackBerry thing, but it's really cheap and it only runs on its own social media.
Nice.
Like a Google Plus.
It's Meverse.
Yeah, Google Plus.
You want to talk the most pivotal, inspirational moments of all time? Google Plus.
Google Plus,
That's the one.
baby. Dude,
That's
we
the one.
tried, man. We tried.
What do you mean we? I did nothing.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, we tried. I had friends back in the day that like we tried to like make it. We tried to make Google Plus a thing. Like we were like, oh, we could be on the bleeding edge of technology and have Google Plus accounts for when this blows up because Google is like a huge, massive company, right? That did not work. We swiftly got rid of our Google Plus accounts because nobody used them ever.
No, it was just spam. It was full of spam.
Well, because they had like circles and stuff. It was like weird that it was like it asked you to rank your friends essentially. It was like,
Twitter eventually took that system and it did make sense. But the way that Google Plus did it was just very, very dumb because there was no public social anything except for spam.
Yep.
So it was very bad.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
I will say that the most...
I want to give you, just very quickly, because I think it's always fun to shit on Steve Ballmer because he was an idiot. There was one thing he did that I think is really, really funny. They was like, oh, we got to take out Google. We got to get rid of Google. Can't have Google. They're too big of a competitor. And they had two options, right? And he was like, no. We're not going to go after them on their phones. Windows Phone will always be the best thing. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to create this thing called Bing, and we're going to remove their ability to do search engines.
Oh my
and
God.
he spent, I think, $15 billion trying to get rid of Google from search while not focusing on Android at all. Wow. And now, do you know a single person with a Windows Phone?
They don't exist anymore.
I know somebody with Bing, though.
Yeah, I do know people who use Bing.
I do know people use Bing.
Yeah. But, well, although, to be fair to those people, as much as I disagree with their life decisions, their family, and everything that they've ever said in their lives, they are correct in that they use Bing for, like, Xbox rewards. Like, they get, like, Xbox rewards points for Bing, and so
that's the only way anyone uses Bing.
Yeah.
But that's also proof of how bad Bing was as a concept, that they have to pay you to use it, and people still don't.
No, when you said I want to shit on this guy some more, I was like,
came up with Windows Vista, Nico.
I was like, I bet he conceptualized Bing, and then you immediately went on to outline how he conceptualized Bing.
Everything. Seriously, if you just like list out all the things that Steve Ballmer did, and you were just like, okay, so how did the market react to this? In every single case, he was wrong. Every single case, except like at one point, right? He tried to, and you might remember this. He tried to turn Xbox into the home cable box.
Yes.
That was his big idea. It's got to be a cable box. And he tried to do this for many years, right? And at one point, Bill Gates had to come in and be like, no.
Yeah,
and then Bill Gates wasn't a part of it anymore. And what did he immediately do?
Because there's still a pass-through. If you have the old Xbox One, there's a pass-through specifically for you to plug your HDMI from your cable box into your Xbox, and then the Xbox into the TV.
That's so extraneous. What is that? Oh my god!
So you can control your TV with Kinect, because Kinect is the future.
Kinect is the future. God, dude! Yeah.
I had a Kinect when those things like first came out. Like I bought it like immediately because I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be cool," and then it wasn't. I bought a Wii and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be cool," and then it wasn't. Speaking of influential technologies, the Wii,
you just literally proved how it wasn't though.
Like, precisely. Yeah, exactly.
You didn't like PS
the thing
Move?
is,
no, I think the Wii, if we're talking in terms of like pivotal moments, the Wii is one of them, because it set the stage for the normification of games, which is what led to apps down the road after that.
100%. I absolutely agree. The Wii really made it kind of
it's why Nintendo struggled, because they had the idea for a tablet, but they were late. Because the iPad came first. If the Wii U comes out a year or two prior, it still sucks, but it's a much more interesting device.
It's at the cutting edge,
Yeah.
No, absolutely, 100%.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, ironically, of course, Nintendo wouldn't have come up with it because of their whole lateral technology with withered whatever thing, right? Yeah. Their lateral thinking with withered technology. So, like, they never would have come out with a tablet first, specifically because it would have been too expensive.
I think the tablet was actually, I want to say, when did the iPad first drop? 2010?
Question.
2010?
I can Google that.
I think it's 2010. The iPhone's 2007.
iPhone's 2004.
Is it? iPod Touch is 2004. I thought iPhone was 2007.
2010 Maybe for the iPad.
Hey, got it right.
That was impressive, actually.
It is 2007. You're right. Wow.
First iPhone launch, 2007.
Strong memory.
So I got 2 for 2. Let's fucking go.
Yeah.
When was the iPod Touch first launched?
04 or 03 maybe. Because it was 04 because The Office.
I'm clearly just shifted slightly.
2007 iPod Touch first launch.
But
I think no, because the iPod Fat had video on it. Like there was like one of the older iPods.
Yeah,
yeah, because you could use
the Office exists entirely past season 1 because of the iPod deal. But what I was gonna say was I'm pretty sure that the specs for the Wii U were already in place sometime around 2009 before the iPad was revealed. Not that sense. Tablets were an original idea at that point, and not that the Wii U would have been specifically what tablets would become, but the original Wii U was 2 Wiimotes with a touch screen in the middle. Like that was what the gamepad's prototype was.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing about the gamepad is it used the same technology as the bottom screen of the DS, which was the old technology for touchscreens, as opposed to the new technology for touchscreens that was introduced in the iPod Touch and the iPhone.
Dude, I cannot believe that this MF, this guy that Moriarty brought up, what's his name?
Steve Ballmer.
Steve Ballmer. I cannot believe that this guy really said, oh, people won't want to touch their screens, but what they will want to do is get up and move around and control everything with like their arms and legs.
He was wrong about everything. He's absolutely wrong about everything.
In context, that one, like the touchscreen part, I don't get, but in context, the idea of using like the Force makes complete sense because that was every sci-fi thing ever was that.
Okay, using the Force, but not like making you stand up to do it.
Well, most games
I think it's hilarious that you've never heard of him when he's the 6th wealthiest man in the world.
The only thing I know him from is he owns the Los Angeles Clippers.
The Clippers.
He bought the team that has never made it past the second round of the playoff. Never once
who he is. Never he's always going to be second place no matter what.
Yeah.
It's not even second place, it's like 8th place.
And I only know things about music.
God.
Well, speaking of music, considering the actual topic of this, I think we could bring up Spotify as one of the most kind of influential moments, right?
Actually, it'd be Napster.
No.
Well, I see what he's saying with Spotify.
You got to let me actually give my point before you say I'm wrong.
No, it's not wrong. Just
when they launched publicly in 2008, right? I feel, revolutionized the sharing and consumption of music, because now all of a sudden you no longer had albums, you had playlists, right? So while yes, Napster changed it and made it a little bit more digital, no longer after Spotify do you have an album, you have the number one song, right? You have the playlist of songs. You have transitioned it, right, from where there's no longer, oh, we've got an album with a filler song on it, right? We've got an album with 3 really good hit songs and then that, other 9 that have to be on it. Now you can put out a 3-song album, and I think that's really changed how artists look at it. Followed, of course, then by TikTok and how it has additionally
even shortened everything even further.
Yeah, because I mean, so many songs now just get to the you'll see so many 2 or 3 minute songs, they're 2-minute songs now versus what it used to be, where there was a set structure that was like 3 minutes and change. And now an album is half an hour.
But Moriarty's absolutely right, though, that these are 3 clear inflection points in technology that revolutionized the music industry, right? So back during the Napster days, right? Napster made music digital, to Moriarty's earlier point. We wouldn't have Spotify without Napster, full stop. We wouldn't have digital music without Napster. We wouldn't have had LimeWire, all of it, right? But what's really funny to me is the parallel universe in which Sony buys Napster. They had the opportunity to at one point when Napster was at its peak and when Metallica was getting everything messed up around there. Sony had the opportunity to buy Napster, but instead they chose the short-term payout and they sued Napster instead. If Sony had bought Napster, we see a service like Spotify come out of Napster organically much quicker.
I don't think so. I think so.
I think so 100%.
I think what we would have seen is exactly what we did see from their competitor, Apple, with the iTunes Store. Mm-hmm. I think we would have immediately seen, if they bought Napster, we would have seen that. And we would have seen more ringtones. We would have seen more, buy a ringtone for $4.99, because Sony is not capable of thinking ahead like that. I don't think we would have seen it.
You're right, but I suppose in this alternate universe, they could see ahead because they decide to buy Napster. But
well, so my thought in that front is that if we're talking around that era, I think it's that if Sony buys Napster, yes, you see Apple jump into the fray sooner or more in a more pronounced fashion sooner. Mm-hmm. But I think that Sony buying Napster in that instance would mean that the music industry is now yet again in control of the distribution process, which is what Sony has always had a hand in because of their technological input. The CD, for example, them and Philips together made the CD commission. I forget the exact name that they made, but the joint company that they made.
I don't know the name either, but I know what you're talking about.
So it'd be interesting because that's sort of what's the word? That sort of shift to have like Sony Records in charge of the distribution of music at a digital level again means that we don't see the Spotify issue where profits are being held by a third-party company. It's then still held internally by the industry itself. And I think that would be an interesting shift because the pushback wouldn't be nearly as apparent because you can't really talk smack about your boss. You can talk smack about the company that's not paying you ad revenue.
Yeah, it's hard to talk bad about Sony Music if you're one of the, 10,000 active artists that are on the label.
Yeah, because there's only like 4 record labels.
Yeah. Oh, man. No, that makes sense. And I mean, I do have a more maybe relatable music example, if you guys are willing to indulge me for a second.
God, isn't that what this podcast is?
Yeah, that's fair. We all indulge each other. And Justin, you get one in the tank because I'm coming to you next. But basically, Phil Collins invented this whole technique in music making by accident that defined the entire 80s. So, for those of you who don't know, there's a technique in music production called gated reverb. It's not important what it is, but what is important is that Phil Collins accidentally discovered it, I guess, because his engineer left the talkback mic on. Or that's the legend anyway. The engineer left the talkback mic on, and Phil Collins was like, "Yo, that sounds cool." And so he took that effect and just ran with it, right? And that's the entire 80s. They put it on drums. They put it on guitars, synthesizers, vocals, right? You listen to In the Air Tonight, it's on Phil Collins' vocals and the drums, everything real, real wet, and it's really interesting when you know what you're listening for. So I did put a little bit of I have a little bit of a soundboard effect here that I'm going to play. I have a vocal sample of mine that's raw, and then a vocal sample of mine that has the effect on it. Should I play them?
Sure.
Okay. So I'll play them, and we'll edit it in post for the folks at home. So this is the sample with no reverb. She knows that she's too much for me. I know that I can't take the heat. She just keeps turning it up. I cannot stop these in the middle, so I apologize. Here's the one now. That's just the dry vocals, right? And here's the effect. Here's the Phil Collins gated reverb effect. Is everyone excited? Here it is. She knows that she's too much for me. I know that I can't take the heat. She just keeps turning it up. So that's it.
I appreciate you showing us what reverb is.
No, it's a specific type of reverb. It's called gated reverb. The idea is that you chop off the tail of the reverb. It's really cool, and I think it's awesome. And it's that 80s sound. It's that big, huge, like stadium arena rock type effect. Super chill, super cool. So anyway, I digress unless anyone has any other thoughts on that. Justin, do you have any other examples?
I think that they should put tooth tunes into more toothbrushes. That's something that should have changed everything, but didn't. Did anyone ever have those toothbrushes where it was a motorized toothbrush. Mm-hmm. You put it in your mouth. You'd brush your teeth, and while you were brushing your teeth, it would play a song, and because it was touching your teeth, it would play in your head.
Yeah, it was super. Oh, but the thing was, they put it on like a little mechanism that when you push the toothbrush back is when it would play the music. Mm-hmm. So when you would take it out of your mouth, it would stop playing.
Yep. And then it would have like a song, cool. And then it would end the song when you were done brushing your teeth to let you know you brushed your teeth long enough.
Yeah.
They should have done something with that.
And yet kids still didn't brush their teeth for the appropriate amount of time.
No, they couldn't do it. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
We should do that with soap.
We should.
You get soap, and then rubbing it between your hands plays music through your fingers so that it lasts exactly 20 seconds on loop so that you can then make sure your hands are clean.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I
just think every time that you use a soap dispenser, it should just play the ice cream truck theme song for however long you're supposed to wash your hands.
Do you mean the Master P song?
Yeah.
I do have another one that I think was pretty influential.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about how Nico doesn't read, and so Amazon Kindle. This has been a very big change to sort of the literary community. Not only the e-reader itself, right? The idea of having an e-reader, but the system and the platform behind it. Because not only did the device transform the way that people consume books, I know many, many people that are readers that now just use ebooks for everything. The having that accessible on a handheld device, being able to have 50 books or 500 books or whatever.
And not needing a physical bookmark, too.
Absolutely huge. I know that once I used to spend somewhere around like $30 a week on books. I would go every weekend and buy a couple of books. And it's not hard to spend $30 because that can be one book or five, right? Mm-hmm. And I would buy a bunch of different things to read. And then once Kindle came out, I found that it was a lot easier to do that. And they tend to be cheaper as well, which is helpful for me.
Yeah.
But more importantly, they also introduced their self-publishing platform, which is called Kindle Direct. And I happen to know this because I've been looking at publishing a book. And I feel that democratizes sort of the publishing world in a way that we've never really seen. It used to be that if you had a book, sort of like today, if you have a movie, right? You could compare it at some point to music, but you really can't anymore. But if you had a book similar to a movie, you have to send it to somebody who has to, first of all, actually see it, which is very, very difficult, right? That's the first filter, and maybe 99% are never seen. And then of the 1% that are actually seen, you have to get through the person who chooses to filter out that book, right, or that movie. And they may just be like, oh, it's about women, I don't care. Oh, it's about science fiction, I don't care. We don't do Westerns anymore, right? And even if it's the greatest Western science fiction film about women, because that person doesn't like those three things, that film is never getting through the filter, no matter what you do. Whereas now we have this publishing system where you can go, and it's incredibly inexpensive, if not free. And you can put up this book, and you can sort of, I don't want to say revolutionize, but it removes the traditional gatekeeper and allows you to kind of reach into the reader itself directly. And it creates this incredible diverse library now, literal library, and this diverse landscape with all sorts of indie authors. And today, the wealthiest author in the whole world, as of like the past couple of years here, and I'm talking like terms of revenue, not personal wealth, is the guy. His name is Brandon Sanderson. He's a little indie writer who managed to get some very lucky breaks along the way, and he sold a thing on Kickstarter or whatever for Kindle published books for like $40 million for like 3 books. It's insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, that's
you've got all
nuts.
sorts of genres that didn't exist. So I'm a big fan of a genre called lit RPG, which is as nerdy as it sounds, I promise you. And it's basically just a whole bunch of different isekais, right?
Oh, okay. I thought it was going to be RPGs with like a bunch of like drugs and booze in it.
No, it's more like people being pulled into video games. It's incredibly nerdy, but I really love them a lot. And this whole genre doesn't really exist without the ability to do this, right? Because you had a couple of people who were very successful at it, and they created a few different stories in that sort of universe, or rather in those universes, and then they were very, very successful. But they never would have gotten through the traditional publishing. It never would have happened. So I think that the Kindle itself is very influential, but the Kindle Direct is also incredibly influential.
I'll take that, and I will raise you the printing press.
Eli Whitney. He really brought up Eli Whitney on the podcast.
Didn't he make the cotton gin?
Who cares?
Yeah, you're thinking a few hundred years too late on that one.
Eli Whitney and his printing press.
Yeah. Eli
That's
Whitney
a new
and
genre.
the printing press.
It's a new genre of literary magnificence.
I'll be honest with you. The thing I find the most impressive about the Kindle,
Guggenheim Bible.
Yeah, all three.
Sorry, wait. I have one more bit, Justin. Sorry, I want to invent the cotton rum. That's it. That's the bit. Justin, continue.
Okay. So the thing I found the most interesting about a Kindle itself, and this is more about the technology of it, the fact that it had like a paperback screen, because at the time there was nothing ever like that, so it made it actually feasible for you to read it like a book. If it was just an iPad, it wouldn't work as well as it did, I think.
Yeah, being able to read it in bright light and being able to read it, kind of like wherever, like you could a book. The one thing that does suck about it, I actually switched over to an iPad as my Kindle. It's the only thing I use my iPad for. It's a glorified Kindle.
So that's why you don't sleep.
I'm just constantly laying in bed with an iPad.
He's just like reading feverishly, like
I can turn off the light
through pages.
Right?
So,
like that's
so
the big
quickly.
thing for me is I can turn off the light, and that helps because I'll just pass out on an iPad. I can't turn off the light with a Kindle.
Wait, hold up. Are you like a teenage girl, like on your stomach texting when you read? You fall asleep on the iPad?
He has
Yes,
his like
basically.
feet. His feet are like up in the air, like twiddling.
Yeah.
He's like curling his hair, and he's just like,
I wonder when she'll call me.
I wonder when she'll call me. I'm reading my iPad.
I don't understand what's so funny about this incredibly accurate.
Oh man, dude.
I really do think that, like, because I mean, you had screens like the Game Boy and stuff before, and that was kind of everything before the Game Boy SP with backlit screens.
Yeah, but even the Game Boy, right? The original Game Boy, you had come with a light.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
so
I never understood why they didn't just backlight those screens to begin with.
It would be triple the price.
Right.
Because the Game Gear had a backlit screen, and it was, I want to say, actually 3 times the price of a Game Boy. And the Game Boy being so accessible is what made it the powerhouse that it was.
It was 100. It was 100.
I mean, right? The Sega,
yes, that too.
It lasted for an hour.
Mm-hmm. If that's fair.
The Game Gear took 6 batteries and it lasted an hour, and the Game Boy was 4 batteries and it lasted for 20. And the Game Boy coming out at $99, and coming with pack-in-game Tetris.
Was it $99? That's wildly inexpensive.
The tech just wasn't there otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's really crazy.
And it came with pack-in Tetris. That was the game that was sold with the console. Again, kind of why Tetris is the most high-selling game ever. Because anyone and their mom could have a Game Boy, and anyone and their mom having a Game Boy meant they had Tetris.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And that even went into Nintendo's whole strategy of we're marketing these as toys, which comes into, I think, what might have been the unintentional impetus for this topic, or something that you brought up when we were all hanging out in person recently that was based on the topic that we then talked about, which was I had brought up Super Mario Brothers, not because of what it did for like the genre or anything like that, but because in the US specifically, if you don't have a game like Super Mario Bros. To launch with the NES as a toy rather than launching it as a game system, where does the industry go post video game crash?
Yeah.
Do we start seeing, the UK game companies? Do we see Ultimate Play the Game being the biggest game company in the world?
They already kind of were for a while.
Yeah, but I mean, do they become the biggest game company in the world?
Yeah.
In US and everything?
Yeah.
Do they even change their name to Rare?
Yeah. Do you see the growth of the personal computer console, like the Commodore or the ZX Spectrum or the etc.
Question
Famicom.
Question that I have.
No, Famicom's different.
Question I have: does the NES do as well as it does without Rob? Because Rob was like the toy that was marketed with thing to be a toy.
So I think that's a bit of revisionist history. Like, it did launch with Rob as one of the things that was like meant to sell it as a toy, but I think that very quickly that was if you,
it was thrown away because there's only like 2 or 3 games for it.
Well, there is that, but I even mean like as soon as you get a game like Mario Bros. Anyway, the Rob was their way of getting it in the Toys R Us's, on the toy shelves, to get the system in the door. That doesn't mean it was going to sell. Mm-hmm. It just became a one holiday item. It's no different than those robotic dogs you got in 99 or 2001.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
That's what the Rob was, where you forget it exists after a year.
Yeah.
But without Nintendo considering the system a toy for the sake of getting it on shelves and avoiding the video game ick, the connotation that came with being a video game in the post-Atari crash world. Well, I say world, but country. Because, again, games were doing completely differently. They were doing totally fine in Japan. They were doing better than ever in Europe.
Well, they were doing fine in Japan because Super Mario Brothers 2 years before that.
Well, I mean, that too, but I'm talking like if you look at like the TurboGrafx or the PC Engine was doing well in Japan. Like, there was a war.
Bonk. Everybody was very big fan of Bonk.
Yeah, there was a war going on between that and the Mega Drive. Like, there was a healthy games industry in Japan, even without Nintendo being involved.
The thing, though, right? Like, and this is one of those. I don't want to call it nuance, but it's definitely a semantics thing here. Yes, there was a market in the UK, and yes, there was a market in Japan. But when you look at the global video games market, 99.5% of that was still the US, right? Like, there wasn't a games market, even though there was, right, in terms of just raw dollars. And this is why when Atari had their crash, the revenue for the game industry overall was a 99% drop.
I think that's a US centric number, though. I think if you look at like the sales of video games from 83 to 85 in Japan, they were still competitive with the US. The systems were still selling at a comparable level to the US. It's only after Mario Bros. That you see the NES skyrocket here in the US to the point that now the US is 99% of the industry. You know what I mean? Like, before that.
I don't think so. I think that if you look at the time, right, 1983, if you look at the time when revenues plummeted that much, It was worldwide global revenues that had plummeted that much because of the United States and because Japan and the UK weren't seeing that much revenue. There were a lot of games that were coming out. There's a lot of stuff that's happening, a lot of innovation that's happening, but the games themselves weren't pressing that much profit.
Were the Pong consoles still doing fine? Was it like just the Atari stuff, or was it everything?
Did people really buy Pong consoles?
All the time.
The very first consoles were just one game. They were hard-coded.
It was just hard-coded for Pong. Yeah, and I mean, Nintendo has their own Pong console too. Nintendo made Pong consoles before the Famicom and the
So
NES.
I'm just looking here, right? In 1982, the year before in Japan, it was 1.3 billion, of which almost all of that was Space Invaders.
Okay.
So the market existed, but it was Space Invaders.
So the market existed mainly for the arcades. The home consoles was what really crashed.
Right. That absolutely. Yeah, that's always been the thing. The arcades were fine, right? Arcades are a big thing. They were very, successful. All of these game companies came out of it. And the console is a home console arcade, right? So they would take these arcade games and they would port them to one-off consoles that you would plug in and be able to play.
It's like the joysticks that you plug with the coax.
Exactly. Yeah. So the market, when we're talking about consoles, right, it always has been very US centric, and it still was at that point. At least, as far as we know today, based off of the numbers. But
I'll jump in because I was curious, so I had to search it up. The Famicom in Japan alone was sold more in that 83 to 85 span than it did until 89 in the US, even counting Mario Bros. So I think a lot of the numbers that we have from 83 to 85, Japan's a lot more secretive with their numbers as far as the game industry players go up until a point.
Right, but it would be pre-83 because that's when the crash happened. We'd be looking at 1981, 82. That's when those numbers would be most relevant.
Sure, yeah. What I'm saying is that the systems, like there were several systems doing better in Japan during that era than they were in the years prior. Because the home console market was exploding as the crash is happening here, because there wasn't really as much of a home console market before the 8-bit era in Japan. So it was an inverse.
Oh, so they didn't
really make sense, though.
They didn't really have anything but prior to that, so they weren't burned. Whereas the U.S. market got burned by the Atari consoles, just flooding the market with terrible games.
It wasn't even Atari that was flooding it.
Well, it wasn't Atari themselves. It was other companies making things for the Atari.
Right, which is why Nintendo introduced their whole quality seal thing.
Yeah.
Because ironically led to the issues that we see today with companies not wanting to put certain stuff out. What they did is they locked down through kind of early DRM the physical manufacturing of the cartridge. So in order to make a Nintendo cartridge, you had to pay them to do it, which we now see them still doing with the Switch and all that.
The cartridges, yeah.
Which is what led to the Sega lawsuit with Tengen. Tengen? Yeah, Tengen. But there's an interesting thing to dive into with like the actual the revenue differences as the crash happens, before the crash and afterwards. Because even if you look in the UK or in Europe, for example, one of the things that I'll throw out, this isn't something that changed everything, but one of the things that I'll throw out, and I don't like using this as the specific example, but Persona 5.
Best game.
And the reason I say that is if you look at console sales in the UK and game sales in the UK, there's always been a significant lag for games made in Japan because of the need for localization and multiple translations in the UK, or not, I'm sorry, in Europe, between the UK having a slightly different set of standards than the US. Not even dialect, just publishing standards, to needing an Italian version, a Spanish version, and all of those regions needing their own localized hubs for publishing things. Nintendo didn't care. If you look at the sales, like I pulled this up, and this is what inspired this. You pull up the sales of the systems. The NES did not sell a total 1 million copies until 1990. 5 years after it came out in the U.S., 8 years after it came out in the in Japan.
That's in the world?
Because, in Europe.
Oh, in Europe, okay.
So the NES came out the same time in Europe as it did in the U.S., except it only sold 20,000 copies in that first year. 20,000 NESs were sold in Europe in the first year.
Kind of
right.
insane.
Whereas conversely, when the Nintendo released Zelda in 1986, we know there were at least a million NESs because it sold a million copies.
By that point, there were 2 million.
Again, but at least we know for a fact there's at least a million copies in 1986 in Japan alone because they sold a million copies of the very first Zelda.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I thought you meant in the U.S., sorry. Because in the U.S., by the time that Zelda comes out, they've now sold about 2 million copies, in part because of Zelda's launch.
Yeah.
But in the UK, I'm looking at the numbers, 20,000 from 85 to 86, and then another 160,000 from 86 to 87. But I don't think Zelda came out.
They had such a completely different culture at that. And we've talked about this because of a video that I'm working on here. We talked about it in depth. They had a very different culture in the UK and in Europe towards games because of, modding and kind of creating your own thing and sort of this culture that you would continue to see exist up until a company called id really kind of jumped in there and made their first Doom. But they were working for companies that would produce pieces of code, right? And they would put this code in the back of magazines, and you would get the code and write your own game. And then they would also put these little games that they made onto floppy disks and send them out with the magazines, right?
Floppy disks or even actual tapes.
Yeah, tapes.
Like little cassette tapes.
So you'd take both of these things, they'd send them out to these companies, right, or to customers who paid them for it. And that's where they were copying Nintendo and came up with Dangerous Dave and copyright infringement, which then turned into Commander Keen, which then they used Commander Keen's money to create Wolfenstein after they did, what was it, Phantasm or whatever? I can't remember. Mask of the whatever.
I forget the name too.
And they also did some tank game, names. Super Tank or whatever. And then after that, they created Wolfenstein, which then led to Doom.
I always forget that Wolfenstein was before Doom, considering how impactful Doom was.
Yeah, but like that same culture still exists where you've got these people who are creating these kind of lists of games that you can create off of codes, right, and putting them in the back of magazines, and people would buy the magazines to get the code to write their own games at home, or they would buy these little tapes and floppies and stuff in order to have these tiny little indie games. So that culture still existed at the same time that we see these consoles that are, rising up and selling millions and millions and millions of copies. That whole period of time is really, really, really fascinating because you don't have this sort of unified video game that we do today where we see with the Microsoft Activision, stuff, judges are saying that streaming and consoles and PC and mobile, they're all the same game industry. We don't see that anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
so
not at that point.
To jump it back to what I was getting at, between that and the fact that the systems didn't need or didn't have a purpose in the UK in particular, but then also in Europe thanks to all these delayed releases. Because of those things, you don't see home console gaming take off in the way that you do in the US, where Nintendo is king, or in Japan, where Nintendo is still king. You see like a Sega market in Europe for a while. But the reason that I say that is then because it's because of Atlus, I would argue, that you start seeing the breakthrough of the Japanese, not of the Japanese RPG, but the Japanese RPG in the post PS1 slump that happened to the genre, because it just kind of, people got tired of it and they wanted action games as the console hardware expanded. But with a game like Persona 5, it took a while to come out in the US or in Europe because of localization, but you start seeing around 2016, same time that Pokemon starts trying to localize all at the same time, this more active effort to bring Japanese games day and date with in the European market, in the US market, so that everyone doesn't have to avoid spoilers in an internet age. And I think a game like Persona 5, as well as a game like Yakuza 0, both kind of indicated that games that are profoundly Japanese have a market immediately in other regions, in part because you can find them more easily thanks to the internet, obviously. And so it's an interesting thing, because around that time is when you see Sega buy Atlus and essentially have Atlus or Atlus's localization sub-team localizing every Sega game at that point, so that they're all coming out day and date in every region. And I think that I don't think that I specifically give Persona 5 the exact credit for that, but I think that Persona 5 is one of the 2 or 3 games that at that exact moment in time, they were the right game at the right time in the right place to lead to the industry shifting how it handles not treating Europe like a tertiary market, but treating it like it's, hey, maybe we should actually try there.
Not the game we deserve, but the game that we need right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's games that are just exist that we wouldn't have gotten outside of the original market they were made, if not for something like a Persona 5. Like, there's a reason why The Greatest Attorney just came out on Switch and
Go
everything.
further back, Final Fantasy. Because there were several Final Fantasies that did not come out outside of Japan, because by the time that they would have been localized, it was too late. Yeah. What's the point in releasing Final Fantasy 3 in the real Final Fantasy 3 outside of Japan when the SNES is already out in the US? So you release Final Fantasy 4 there as Final Fantasy 2 because people don't want last gen games. Yeah.
And how many people were playing Dragon Warrior? I mean, how much did that really even matter for people? Because Dragon Warrior games were still coming out on the NES when the SNES was out.
Yeah, and that's because it was so huge in Japan, and the adoption rate for new consoles didn't affect the sales of old console games, both in general for a while. Like, you still saw the NES doing well after the SNES dropped. You still saw the Master System doing well after the Genesis dropped, to a lesser extent, obviously, but it's not like now where when a new console drops, everything the old one is essentially dead until, the PS4, PS5 jump is a little bit different in that because now we're at the point where the systems are just, hey, it's that, but better.
Yeah. And that was great.
I think adoption rates are a really important part of that conversation too, because you look at the PlayStation 2, there were games released for that forever after the PlayStation 3.
I think the last PS2 game was like
2013.
Yeah, it was 2013. It was
like they're still being released for a long time because you've got 100 million of them out there. You still have the player base to do it. That's a whole different discussion that I don't know I super want to have. But I
don't think today's the day for that.
I have a really fun sort of tinfoil conspiracy thought about having these very low end consoles that have such very high end user bases, and how that affects sort of the technological evolution of gaming. Because I think when you look at it and you say, okay, so the Switch has 150 million players or something stupid like that, do you not make the game for the Switch? And if you do make the game for the Switch, boy, do you lower the specs of your game? And I think that there is if not always conscious, there's definitely an unconscious bias towards making a game that can run on the Switch towards a game that can't. And I think that there's some discussion to be had there about whether or not, and again, not intentional in any way, but there's certainly some discussion I think to be had there about whether or not a device like the Switch unintentionally holds back the evolution of certain parts of gaming as an industry.
So I'll throw out for that one. I think that there's a longer conversation to be had, maybe on a separate Crubcast for that, because it's a really interesting topic. But the short version of what I'll say is, I don't think it's necessarily a holding back necessarily. It's such a nuanced topic that it's so hard to get into.
Nuanced. This is why I was like, I don't think it's right for this.
I'll say honestly,
one of the Final Fantasy 16 producers literally said, I'm pretty sure today at the time of recording, that it would be better for there to be one console, because then you could maximize for that hardware instead of having 3 or the twins and then the Switch. And then also in that case having to develop for last gen systems because of the COVID affecting adoption rates to some extent.
I would argue that we do have one system, and that's the PC. And if you just
okay.
No, if you just made it for a PC, then you've got the versions that can run on a Switch and a PlayStation and everything else as well.
Yeah.
Well, they're all developed for PC first at this point anyway, besides no, in general, even Switch games
don't really.
No, they're coding on, like, they're designing
on PC. Yeah, obviously.
Well, they're designing a PC game that it's like, okay, this is the hardware we have to target. Like, it's not. They're not using dev kits nearly as much.
I like that they'll make it work for PC and consoles, and then they just like will not make a game work for Mac. And it's like, well, it seems like
we're talking about player bases here.
It's not a huge gaming player base. Counterintuitive. It feels
anyone who has a Mac that wants to play games has a system for it. They're not going to game on their Mac.
Yeah, that's very true.
I will say
that's why the Sims exists on Mac, and that's it. That's all you need.
Yeah, you're seeing some of them come. You see things like the Sims. You see Fortnite, the mega properties that make sense.
Death Stranding.
Yeah.
Well, that's just because Apple has infinite money. They just wanted a Kojima for something.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I will say, if you were holding back games for something specific, I would say probably mobile, to be honest with you.
Because mobile development is a completely different sub-studio. Like Apex Mobile is not being developed by the same Respawn
that's
group.
a whole different thing.
Yeah. That's a wildly...
I think mobile gaming is a Crubcast topic in itself.
The problem that I have is that I think that if you're coding for the Switch, you should also be coding for mobile, and instead they're coding for the Switch and PC.
It's like the Switch and mobile should be on one side and everything else should be on the other, but instead Switch is on this side and mobile's
this is
here.
my grand hot take is that the Switch is not just the Switch, but several different things throughout the history of gaming have sort of been these big barriers that have these massive user bases that nobody can kind of get past. And because of that, once they eventually do, we see these big jumps in technology. But I think we would have had them already without the massive player bases.
To some extent, I think in the past that would be the case. I don't know that I believe anymore that would be the case after like 2019 or so, mainly because at a point all of the Switch ports were just the sliders are turned down. Yeah. And they made sliders an applicable thing that you can actually touch on console, accessibility options and visual sliders and all those settings. It was Total Biscuit, I believe, that was the one that pioneered, hey, I'm going to bully you until you do that.
Yes, he did.
That made everyone realize, oh, all these games are just PC games. Yeah. And so I think that the Switch ports are usually a separate team finding ways to scale back rather than we have to design with the Switch in mind, especially now, after like 2020-ish, like in 2021 onward, you start seeing that effort lessened more and more because the Switch's main games are games being made for the Switch rather than ports.
Yeah.
Like when Activision says Call of Duty is going to come to the Switch. No, it's not.
No,
no, it's not.
Yeah, it's going to end up like
there will be
a
Call of Duty on it, but I mean,
it'll be on the Switch 2 or whatever.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's like the Switch 1 probably won't.
Right. Justin has done the honors of finding us a Patreon question of the week.
I have indeed.
So, Justin,
would
you like to?
From patron Andy_MineP. The question of the day is: what is a gaming console you feel had lost potential and could have done even a little bit better than it did? I felt this one kind of tied in with the topic a little bit well.
Dreamcast!
I was going to say the correct answer is the Dreamcast.
Yeah, that's just the right answer.
It's the right answer. The Dreamcast, man. What a cool console that just didn't do anything.
Like, it was doomed either way, even if you discount all of Sega being the most chaotic place to work possible in the games industry. Like, the PS2 was going to demolish it no matter what. But, man, imagine if we had a couple more years of the Dreamcast, man.
I think the Wii could have done more with
one of the most successful consoles of all time.
No, not monetarily. I mean technologically.
If it was more technologically advanced, it wouldn't have sold as well because then it would be too expensive.
Too expensive, yeah.
It always comes down to being more expensive.
Because that's
the
Wii
thing. Did so well because it was like $200 or was it $200
bucks?
It was
$300 at the time.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about we're about to enter a recession by the time that system's dropping.
That's true.
And now you have something for all.
You want to make it as cheap as possible.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
on top of that, right? Grandparents were able to buy it because it was cheap and simple. So it was one of those things where it's like, I'll just get one for each house I go to.
Yeah, and it's like I know how to use a TV remote. That's kind of the gimmick, is that it's kind of like a TV remote. So you just point it at the TV and it works like a TV remote.
Yeah.
I suppose I wish the sensor worked a little better.
Well, of course.
We've got things like, Phantasy Star Online, which is incredibly interesting. You've got Jet Set Radio. You've got, I don't know, all sorts of Sega first-party things.
Pokemon.
Pokemon.
of course, Pokemon on the
We'll have to
Sega
tell that story
Dreamcast.
one day.
Yeah, one day we'll
all
tell
these
the story.
incredibly visionary pieces of content that are coming out.
I just think that the VMU is such an interesting concept for an accessory for the console.
Well,
There's
what's
so many
interesting
interesting
is
things.
I think the Pocket Station existed before the VMU, which is the fun part. But it only came out in Japan, so it didn't do anything.
Yeah,
So it's
The
interesting.
VMU.
a virtual
It was
memory.
the memory card. It was the memory card for the Dreamcast, which you plugged into the controller, but it was also a Tamagotchi style screen, so you could play mini games on it.
Oh, see, I like that because I don't have to get up and stand up to put my memory card in.
And
the
you don't have to
console.
I'll throw you out
stand there
another
with your-
one that would be interesting to have, and only because, wow, it would have been wild to see this do well, was the Neo Geo from SNK.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
that would have been really, really cool to see do well because
Really,
it was.
I mean, but who could afford $200 a game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was literally an arcade board that you'd plug into your TV, and you had an arcade cabinet as a console, and the cartridges were literally. I mean, there's no good scale of reference, but like this is a normal water bottle in my hand. It was like 3 times the size of this.
Yeah.
Like the
Super neat.
I think
But
it did okay in
$200 a
Japan
game.
too. It was just a different cultural style.
'Cause the
that
idea
I think
is,
What
made
year
that
was that?
thing
1990? What would $200 be in today?
a lot.
Good, yeah, a lot.
because I think
probably.
theoretically,
350.
like
So it'd be $470
for
So
one
imagine
game.
spending $470 on a single game.
I mean,
That's not Fortnite.
and think about it, like
my
you can
gosh.
buy an arcade one-up
Or
now for
Genshin.
$300. Oh, Genshin.
Yeah, Genshin. Yeah. Justin spent a lot of money on Genshin.
But like you know, like the arcade one-ups you see at like Walmart, those things are $300 now, and those basically
Yeah.
do what an arcade one-up does, but for 10 games in one package, and you get
Yeah.
an entire cabinet with it, like the entire wood
Yeah.
paneling and everything that goes into
Yeah.
a cabinet.
And then you can just get a Raspberry Pi and put the rest of them on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, actually, that's an incredible piece of technology that we didn't talk about today. The Raspberry Pi, man, that's wildly cool. It got rid of ads. What else could do that?
oh yeah, true. I heard about that.
I need
I
to set one up for my new place. I haven't done it yet, but it's on my list.
I think the Ouya is a console that could have done better.
It could
It could have done anything.
Oh no! Wait, he's for our audio listeners out there. Kevin put up the 1 minute sign in his hand, and he just got up out of his chair.
Does he have
He's
an Ouya?
doing something.
Does Kevin have an
We
Ouya?
don't know.
I believe he has an Ouya. Yeah.
Let's see.
Oh, there it
Let's
is!
see
In
it.
the
Oh my
box.
god! In the box.
I spent like $20 on this, and then the Ouya died like a month later.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
It had
I bought
the
that
amazing-
a couple years ago because I was going to do a video on the Ouya, and then the Ouya was immediately shut down. So it's now just I can pull out the controller while you tell us
Nice.
where they can sign up to get those Patreon questions of the week put into our little form.
Yes, they can sign up to get those Patreon questions of the week on our Patreon. I believe it is Crub official still, right? And
I think it's
So
patreon.com/Crub.
begins the revolution.
and so begin the revolution. Yeah, so patreon.com/Crub. You can find us at crub.org as Kevin holds up the mid Ouya controller, the mid-looking Ouya controller.
You can just take off the thing and put the batteries in.
The battery goes in the
Oh,
batteries
it
out.
runs on a AA battery.
It runs on
Yep,
two AA
that's
batteries because it's on
two
both
AA
sides.
batteries. Wow.
Is it on both sides?
It is.
In 2023, it runs on two AA batteries. Oh my god. And
My favorite game.
with
The buttons say Ouya.
My favorite.
buttons say Ouya.
My favorite Ouya game.
Where's the X?
Yeah, where's the X button? Every game console has an X button, including PC.
This thing feels like shit.
That's why it failed. No X button.
My
Yeah, that's
favorite.
true,
My
that's
favorite
true.
Ouya game was Super Sexy Swiss Ambulance Transplant Team.
That would be your favorite game. Is it a gotcha game?
No, it's a game where
Yes, it is.
you're a
Sorry.
bear driving an
I held it
ambulance.
upside down.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, is
hold it
that
upside
the
down.
Ouya?
That's the Ouya.
I
Does
didn't
the Ouya
realize
look-
because it's so shit.
I like that it looks like an Amazon Fire TV Cube.
It looks like a Google
That's-
Dot.
Yeah. Oh, for real. That's bizarre.
You know what we really need you to get now is you need to go pick up an Intellivision.
Yeah.
No,
God,
don't do that.
Oh my god, yeah. He faked us out. He faked us out. Well, with that, fellas, I think that's a good place to end this one. You can find us in
That's wild.
and so begins the
That's
revolution, the Crub
that's wild.
revolution. You can find all of our links in the description. Find us at Crub Official on everything except Twitch, which is Crub_official. We go live every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. Next week, we are going to be a little bit late. Don't know exactly when, but we're going to be a little bit late on Tuesday next week. So for those of you who watch live, there it is. And with that, for Crub, I've been All Hail Buckets. Crub out.